Hello, welcome back to the Edge of the Box podcast, a podcast by WhoScored.com. Another frantic week in the Premier League. Still one game to come, actually, is wall-to-wall football at the moment. But we're here today to preview the weekend's action. We'll start, though, by talking about the games that have just gone midweek. But at the time of record, we haven't seen the game on Thursday night between Brighton and Manchester United. I've completely forgotten who is at home. But let's talk about Haaland. Broke the Premier League goal-scoring record last night, Jonathan. Ran through kind of a guard of honour where he got slapped on the head by quite a lot of people. But the guy has just been an absolute machine this season, hasn't he? And he's not finished scoring yet, let's face it. He could easily add another 10 goals at least by the end of the season.
Well, he's got potentially eight games left, hasn't he, in all competitions? And I think he'd need to get 12, is that right, to get up to Dixie Dean's record? So, the fact we're even talking about that is ridiculous because nobody's come close in 60... No, hang on. Getting on for 100 years. When was that? 27-8 that he did that? So, I know you'll press the case for Aston Villa's Pongo Waring.
Good player back in the day, Pongo.
Yeah, very unreliable though. Apparently, just would turn up to training whenever he felt like it because he scored goals. Nobody stopped him, and he also had a habit. I have to say, I didn't fully understand what the sentence meant, but it appears that before games or before training, he'd go around all the concession stands and finish off whatever lemonade was left in all the bottles.
I feel like you're just making this up.
No.
Is this a dream you had about Pongo Waring?
No, it's on his Wikipedia page.
Okay. Reliable.
But as I say, I didn't fully understand what it meant. But his real first name Tom, as I'm sure you knew. Pongo's nickname from a cartoon called Pongo the Pup. So yeah, obviously very sad times for Pongo Waring to see his 50 goals per season mark surpassed. And he was the last, and that was 31, I think, when that happened. So again, we're talking nearly 100 years. So. Yeah, Haaland, since he came through at Salzburg, or even people who saw him in Norway, but I first saw him at Salzburg, was obviously a ludicrous talent. I really think in the entirety of world football history, there's maybe been half a dozen players who've had his pace and size and skill, all three of those together. I think maybe the closest thing to him was Bernabé Ferreira, who played for River in the 1930s. I think it's the only time that the world transfer record has gone outside of Europe when River signed him from Tigray for £15,000. And you look at pictures of him and he just looks a different size to all the other players in the same way that Haaland does, but obviously with a load of technical skill as well. And I think there's something very exciting about seeing that, something viscerally thrilling. We saw that at Salzburg, we saw it at Dortmund, and you'd think, well, the Premier League is famously physically tough. It's clearly the highest standard league in the world at the moment. Can he do it there? I did expect him to be able to score lots of goals, but I was thinking in the 20s, not in the 40s. To be scoring over a goal a game in the Premier League, I mean, nobody's. Was 4 players that got over 30 before? These are remarkable things he's doing. It helps, obviously, he's playing in the best side in the league as well. There was already the best side in the league before he arrived. But yeah, I don't think anybody expected him to score quite this many goals, to be quite this effective. And what's been interesting is that there were doubts. There were times when it seemed to disrupt City's structure. And it's only really the last 2 months that those two things have really clicked. And we'll see in the Champions League semi-finals, that'll be the real test. But I suspect the fact that Guardiola's had to compromise his normal purism has probably been beneficial to City. That slight friction has been very creative.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think there's been times where Manchester City haven't felt quite right, but he just for the whole season has been banging the goals in, so it hasn't really affected them in any way at all because they've stayed up there throughout the duration of the season. But I think Cancelo going and having that solidarity at the back with 4 centre backs playing a lot of the time as well has really helped them. And then at that time, it feels like Haaland, it's all knitted together at the time now in the running, hasn't it? Really, that's what it feels like to me.
Yeah, I mean, Guardiola deliberately, in the same way that Wenger used to and Ferguson used to, he tries to tailor training so that they hit April at their strongest. And I think you saw that. I mean, April, they were absolutely brilliant. I don't think it was a fitness thing before that, but obviously all these things mesh together. And as you say, I think the tactical changes with going to a sort of flatter back four, but also augmenting that with Stone stepping in the midfield, all of that has worked. I think that's freed up Grealish. The Grealish relationship with Haaland is really important. De Bruyne, after having that little post-World Cup lull, he's back to his best, and his relationship with Haaland is clearly brilliant. So yeah, everything has come together, and if you can leave the moral stuff to one side, which is difficult, they are brilliant to watch.
Yeah, absolutely sensational, Ben. Well, welcome to the pod. Ben, me and Jonathan have spoken for 5 minutes there, and you've just been sat there listening to us. But Liverpool as well, 5 in a row now. They won last night again, 1-0 against Fulham at home. Bit of momentum at the end of the season. It's probably not going to be enough to get fourth, or it won't be enough to get fourth, but good for them to end the season positively.
Yeah, that's the key thing. Coming to the summer, obviously, we know Liverpool are going to spend big in the midfield in the summer, but it's good for them to have Jota and Diaz back to fitness at relatively the same time. He's got 2 quality options out there on the left. Gakpo started well after his January move. Núñez, he has dropped out of the team recently, but again, he brings the chaos when he comes on, which is kind of what you need from Liverpool's side that is so effective going forward. But as you say, probably a bit too late to mount that top 4 challenge, especially as United and Newcastle both have games in hand over Liverpool in the coming weeks. But, it is a positive coming to the end of the season strongly.
I mean, we will get on to the weekend's action. I'll claw some time back in the running order. But Jonathan, I just want to ask about Bellingham. Looks like he's going to Real Madrid. How greedy are they? Because it looks like Kroos and Modric will be there next season for them. So their options in midfield next season, if Bellingham does side, are going to be out of this world.
Yeah, I mean, you assume that going forward, the midfield 3 will be Tchouaméni, Camavinga, and Bellingham, which, it just looks brilliant. Looks brilliant.
Valverde can play there as well, haven't they?
Valverde as well, yeah. Yeah, that's true. We have seen them play 4-4-2 occasionally. So that's a really good group of players in their early 20s, and that's really exciting for the future. But it's good to have Modric and Kroos there as well for a couple of more seasons. I mean, Modric surely can't go much longer. But if you want to learn from anybody, they're 2 of the best people to learn from. Clearly, they will not be able to play at high intensity on a regular basis in the next year or 2. I mean, Kroos isn't actually that old, is he? He's only 33, maybe?
He's the way he gets around the pitch doesn't feel as.
But he feels old, yeah. Whereas Modric just sort of. I mean, Modric, it seems to me, he went from looking like a child to looking like an old man overnight, about 15 years ago, and hasn't changed, and continues to be brilliant. So, I think that's a really exciting midfield in prospect, and I think it's probably very good for England that. Bellingham's going to be getting further experience playing in a different league, playing alongside players at that level, and almost not having the intensity of the Premier League to sort of sap his energies. So yeah, I think I get why he wants to move there rather than Liverpool, certainly.
Yeah, I mean, Modric is my favourite player to watch in world football, and to be honest, Bellingham's not far off becoming that now already. I think the good thing about those 3 or 4 young midfielders that we've mentioned is they've all got games in the bank as well. It's not like they're coming there and it's a young midfield and it's raw and they haven't played at the highest level. They've all played in big games for their countries and for their clubs. So, that's for Real Madrid going forward. That must be so exciting to know. That's probably our midfield sorted for the next decade. Then, if we want it to be, and they've had such a good midfield over the previous decade as well. Real Madrid fans just absolutely spoilt. Let's look ahead to the weekend. Then, a huge game in the Premier League to start us off. It's Newcastle against Arsenal. Ben, nowadays Newcastle actually seem to have good squad depth. They seem to be able to mix and match their attack, and whatever they do, whoever comes in seems to be productive. You look at Jacob Murphy's in and out of the team, but when he does play, he seems to be scoring and assisting goals. Wilson and Isak are fighting it out at the moment. St. Maximin's been good, but he's injured at the moment. Almiron obviously had that real purple patch earlier on in the season. So Newcastle have suddenly got an array of attacking options that Eddie Howe has managed to elevate a lot of them over the last 12 months to a level we didn't think was possible.
And you've got Anthony Gordon's coming as well. I know he was a big money signing in January and he didn't really score fairly regularly for Everton. But again, options. He's a hard-working winger, which is what Eddie Howe wants from that team. I think the key aspect of that attack has been Isak's return to fitness. He offers that versatility that Wilson perhaps doesn't. Wilson's more of that classic number 9, whereas Isak likes to pull to the wing. I mean, you saw his incredible assist against Everton. And key for Howe in this has been that he's got different strikers for different needs. He's got Isak to pull wide if need be. He's got Wilson to put the ball in the back of the net, but they both haven't been impacted by the lack of game time. If anything, the rotation out of the squad has benefited both strikers, which has been absolutely instrumental in their push for the top 4.
Now, Jonathan, you're going to lead on the next section. We've been speaking about all these top midfielders that Real Madrid have, and Ben has been doing the running order. Joe Willock, good form, agreed. Willock for England, not sure about that. And is he the midfielder Arsenal could do with now?
Right, he's a really good player. That's the first thing. Could Arsenal do with him? Yeah, possibly, because I think when Jack has been out, they've lacked a player with that dynamism. Willock could have done that. It's just this sort of, somebody puts together a run of a dozen good games and suddenly it's, should he be in the England squad? That's not how football works. This idea that international caps are like Blue Peter badges you give out for
they were at one point.
Well, they were at one point, but we've moved on from that. It's not a reward for making, I don't know, a nice castle out of washing up liquid bottles or for putting in a half dozen good games for Newcastle. The England squad is really good at the minute, really good. It's as good as it's been in 40 years. And one of the reasons for that is they have a set style of play. They know what they need in all those, in different positions. And there's not really a role for Willock. It shouldn't be, does Willock deserve an England cap? It should be, would England be better by bringing in anybody else? And where Willock just doesn't fit in that midfield. Rice clearly sits at the base of that midfield. Calvin Phillips maybe alongside him. Jordan Henderson maybe alongside him. Maybe standing in for Rice if Rice is injured. Bellingham, and then probably Mason Mount or Phil Foden. Willock just sort of complicates that. You could bring him in the squad. I'm not saying he's not good enough for England. He just doesn't fit this England setup. And what frustrates me is just this way of looking at international football that this is how Todd Bowley would look at international football. He is a good player. Let's just get him. Well, that's not how it is. It's you have to think about what is the unit. How does the unit develop? And you don't develop a unit sensibly by just bringing in good players. So it's not to say Willock's not a good player. He is a really good player, and I think one of the things we've seen this season is people talking about the Arsenal Academy isn't it great? It's brought through Saka and Reece Nelson and Nketiah, Smith Rowe, albeit he's been injured for a lot of the season, and yeah, that's true. But think of the Arsenal Academy of sort of 5 years, a decade ago. They brought through Willock and Gnabry and Iwobi. Okay, Saka's probably better than any of them, but maybe he's just a better player from birth. The Arsenal Academy's been really good for a really long time, and Willock is part of that. But yeah, just he's English. He's played well recently. Should we give him an England cap? It's just how you produce losing football teams at the national level.
It's a good argument you put forward there. I would actually argue, and I'm going to maybe put myself in the bad books here, Sean Longstaff would actually be a better fit for England in terms of where position he plays and how he plays the game than Willock at the moment, because he is a more defensive midfielder, and he a bit like Calvin Phillips in the way he plays the game in some respects. So I think Longstaff would actually be a better fit for England than Willock. I think he's had a really good season, Longstaff.
I sort of see the argument, but I mean the big difference between him and Calvin Phillips is Calvin Phillips' passing range.
Yeah.
Calvin Phillips' passing is extraordinary, and the pace at which he can do it when he's on form.
Can't go on the bloody peak.
Well, yeah, and that's a problem. And I hope for his sake and England's sake that either he gets pitch time or that he leaves, because I think he's him at Leeds was a great player to watch, and it frustrates me slightly that we don't get to watch him more regularly.
Coming on in stoppage time last night for Rodri, almost felt a little bit insulting. I thought. I mean, he looked quite happy about it, in all honesty, when he was coming on.
Probably gets an appearance bonus.
Yeah, it's probably quite hefty as well, isn't it? Playing for Manchester City. Ben Bowley, have you got anything to say in defence of your actions, your script writing?
I'm fully on board with Joe Willock for England just because that's my argument. That's it.
Okay. Was it a group decision to bring this into the running order, or was it a purely Ben Bowley decision?
It's mainly that, it comes back from when Tim Sherwood said, I want my defenders to defend, my attackers to attack, and my midfielders to do a bit of both. And after the Spurs win, Eddie Howe said Joe Willock has got a little bit of everything. And he's developed his game into this, couldn't really pigeonhole him into like...
No, you lost me at Tim Sherwood.
Tim Sherwood, all right. I'm right.
The base of this argument is the gospel of Sherwood.
As soon as you said that, you just lost me.
Good one. But
the confusion on Jonathan's face as well.
That's what it stemmed from. It's not saying that because of Tim Sherwood we should get Joe Willock in the squad. Joe Willock has developed his game in that functional midfield three with Guimaraes and Joe Ellington. He can do, his good work at both ends of the pitch. That's 6 assists and 3 goals is sort of testament to the attacking side to his game. And he has proven, he stepped his game up off the ball to make that functional midfield three, which kind of where the argument stems from, where potentially he could be in the England squad, maybe not as a long-term fit, but as just a test to see, could he do the job? Henderson's, the wrong side of 30 now. Could he fill a gap there? I mean, they've got Bellingham there. Henderson is probably a different midfielder to Willock. So it's just a case of experimenting to see whether Willock would fit in that number 8 role, just to give England options, really.
I got so hot. But then I think I went bright red as well. I was trying to because I was trying to let you speak, but I couldn't hold it in any longer when you said. I think we're all in agreement that Willock is a very good player. I just think we're probably not all in agreement that he should be in the England squad. Let's talk about Arsenal now. I mean, again, you can tell a Spurs fan has wrote this script. Jonathan, looks like Arsenal have bottled it. Where would they need to improve?
Can I make an argument? Can I make an argument and say that I wrote the script with Martin, so it wasn't just me?
I mean, Martin nowadays, you don't hear off the guy. He started doing the podcast last season. never seen it.
And what was?
It's not just me.
What was Tim Sherwood's input into this bit of the script?
Yeah,
he said Joe Willock because
get him on the pod.
He can do his defending, he can do his attacking, he wants his midfielders to do a bit of everything. So there we go. Tim Sherwood's in there.
I mean, Tim Sherwood also said after Aston Villa had lost a game to Leicester when they were 2-0 up, he said, it wasn't Leicester, actually, it was a different game. He said, Tim Sherwood's not in a hole. Aston Villa are in a hole. And then he literally lost his job the next day. After he said it, I could do a whole podcast on Tim Sherwood. I absolutely love the bloke. I
could do another one if you want. We'll do a Tim Sherwood special. Combine it with Nathan Jones as well.
Class. But yeah, I don't think. Actually, let's talk about the bottling. Let's talk about. I don't like that term. I don't think they have bottled it. I just think they've not quite been at the level required. And Manchester City are a machine. Would you go along with that, Jonathan?
Well, I think it's a case of two different things being true. So I don't think Arsenal's squad. The reason nobody thought Arsenal would, before the season when we were making predictions, nobody said Arsenal would win the league, and the reason for that was we looked at the squad and it fairly obviously wasn't deep enough. And then they did extraordinarily well in that first 2/3 of the season, 3/4 of the season. They were pretty lucky with injuries as well, and they got themselves in a position where they had a chance of winning the league, and that was way better than expectations, way better than any of us thought. And then, having got in that position, two things happened. So one was they got a couple of key injuries, notably Saliba, and the backup options to Saliba, particularly with Tomiyasu being out, just weren't good enough. And the second thing is that if you're 2-0 up and that controlling a game as they were at Anfield, and even more so again away at West Ham, and you then don't take full points from those games, if you end up drawing both of those games from 2-0 up and cruising, then I think you do have to say that is that is to do with anxiety, it is to do with nerves, there hasn't been that calmness you need to see a game through, and then to follow that up by by letting in the 2 soft goals early on against Southampton just compounds that. So it's not a case that they were the best team by miles and then froze. They were putting together a challenge that was very unlikely, and then at a key moment when the squad was already starting to creak, they did just have a couple of mental blips that let opponents back into games they should never let them back into. So have they bottled it to an extent? But I think far more significant, as you say, is they're up against a brilliant City team. They've way exceeded expectations. But in the end, the limitations of their squads caught them up. And you can even make the case that the two things are related, that when you're buying a player for huge amounts of money, one of the things you're looking for is a player who has that capacity to control a game when you're 2-0 up, who doesn't sort of have that wobble. And it's not that those games were sort of freakish, that suddenly Liverpool scored 2 goals from nowhere, suddenly West Ham scored 2 goals from nowhere. Arguably the first goal back against Arsenal in each of those games came from nowhere. But then after that, the way that Arsenal really struggled to control possession, the way they gave the ball away repeatedly, the same at times against Southampton, players playing way under their level, but that level of composure is part of the package of what makes a great player. And those are players, maybe slightly lacking experience, who will develop that. Maybe, whose value is just not quite as high as it might be because they do have that tendency to drop off under pressure. I think the fact that it happened last season as well. And again, you can say similar things, squad size, but also there was a sort of a psychological downturn that last 5 or 6 games of last season when it really came to the crunch time. It's not as bad this season, but it has happened again. So it's a little bit bottling, but mainly depth of squad and the quality of City.
Got to lose something first as well to progress and go on to win it. I think you think of Klopp's Liverpool; they ran Man City so close that one season and didn't quite win the league, and then I think they went on and won it the next season. They lost the European Cup final and then won it the year after. So sometimes you have to lose to be able to win, and Arsenal's development and where they're at is so far superior to where we thought they would be this season. I think they've had a great season at the moment. They've got I saw this tweet from somewhere else. I can't remember where I've stolen it from. I'm not going to try and claim it as my own. But at the moment, they've got a good plan A that has got them up the league. Probably not quite got a plan B or a plan C at the moment when things are going against them, because they're not quite at that phase in their development where they've got that mentality and they've got that ruthlessness. Oh, that's not a word. And is that what word am I trying to say? Ruthlessness. That's what I was trying to say. And in the big moments, it wasn't actually the inexperienced players that cost them. You think of when you think of it was probably Xhaka and Partey in the Liverpool and West Ham games. Suddenly, they were the ones that seemed overawed by. Well, I think in particular in the West Ham game, I thought.
I think Odegaard in both of those games and the Southampton game, certainly for Patch for Southampton game, although he became good again towards the end. I think he had a little dip, and he's. I know he's been around for ages because of being signed for Real Madrid when he was 16, but he's only 23, 24?
Yeah, he's young.
He's sort of simultaneously an old 23, 24 and a young 23, 24, because although he's sort of been around big clubs for 8 years, he hasn't played a huge number of games for big clubs. He had his time, but went very well in the Netherlands on loan and then at Real Sociedad. But this is his first experience of a title challenge. So whatever his qualities as a player, whatever the leadership qualities he has, it's new territory for him.
Yeah, and also because of how well they've done, they've opened up a different transfer market for themselves this summer. Declan Rice to Arsenal 12 months ago, unthinkable. No chance does he even think about that move. Now they're probably in pole position to get him in. So what they've done this season is open themselves up to a different market, got themselves back in the Champions League, whether they win the league or whether they don't. So they're in a good position now to push on and be sustainable and have a longer term plan. Arsenal now, I think, yes, you could say they've bottled it, but they've still had an unbelievable season. Ben, we're going to have to go straight to the combined 11 here. I'm interested to see what WhoScored have come up with for this one, because I think it could probably be tight in a few positions.
It is, yeah, of course. It usually is with WhoScored. Best 11 says, questionable decisions all over the place, but I think this one's a pretty sound 11. Nick Pope in goal, Tim Sherwood as manager. He's also in goal and at right. Nick Pope in goal. Kieran Trippier right back. Shah, Gabriel centre back. Zinchenko left back. Midfield three of Erdegaard, Guimaraes and Joe Ellington. And up front it's Saka, Jesus and Martinelli.
What have you come up with, Jonathan?
Not that dissimilar. Pope, Trippier. I struggle with the centre backs because the two I want both play on the left, but I'm gonna try it. At least try it in training, see if I can do it. Gabriel and Botman together. Zinchenko on the left. Bruno Guimaraes, Joe Willock, and Odegaard in midfield, and then Saka, Isak, and Martinelli up front. Stressing this is very much on present form. Yeah, I think if you're picking overseas, and Partey probably would get in there ahead of. Well, Partey would take Guimaraes as well, and Bruno Guimaraes would push forward instead of Willock. I think.
Be an unbelievable bench between those two teams. Plenty of options. Yeah. Plenty of options to bring off the bench. No big Dan Burn on either side.
Zinchenko's good.
Yeah, he is. But Dan Burn's had a very good season as well. Okay, then let's get the predictions. Then Ben, the Spurs fan, what's your prediction for Newcastle v Arsenal?
He dropped the Spurs then in there.
There's no way you're predicting them to win.
No, I had Newcastle to win 2-1. I just think home advantage.
Yeah,
I think home advantage. Arsenal have this habit of when they're away, they're playing away and the home crowd kind of gets up against them, they get a bit overawed. That's probably down to an experience, which is understandable at this stage of their project. But I think Newcastle should win this one 2-1.
Yeah, I can't say past 2-1 either. I just think Newcastle will be too strong at St James's at this stage of the season. Jonathan?
Well, also 2-1 to Newcastle.
2-1 to Newcastle. Not often we all come up with exactly the same score. I mean, as we know, it's completely meaningless, but not often we all come up with exactly the same score when we're doing our predictions. Let's look at Pep's Manchester City against a manager that's clearly better than him, Sam Allardyce's Leeds. Jonathan, can you believe Sam Allardyce said that in his press conference? 2, can you believe he's back? I tuned into that press conference live yesterday, and it was just a feast of words.
Yeah, it's just magnificent, isn't it? Like, I don't know. This season, I think we've talked before about how there's been some really good cameos this season. Yeah, Todd Bowley is a great new character to bring in. Nathan Jones was great for that 6 weeks. Getting Sam back when we've already got Roy Hodgson there, when we've already got David Moyes there, where we've already got Frank Lampard. It's like an EastEnders Christmas special or something where all the favourite old characters come back. And then just that it's just a brilliant detail. The fact that Sammy Lee can't join him because he's on jury service and the judge won't release him. And Sam sitting there in a press conference saying, no, I think it's a really bad judgment. Of course he can't be released from a trial that's already going on to go manage Leeds for 4 games. But then that line, the wee man loves being with me and I love being with him. It's just beautiful. Sam having to do it alone. Yeah, the great hole in his heart as he misses his long-term assistant. And I don't think it's going to happen. But imagine they did go to City and get something and reawaken the title race. It would just be the greatest plot twist in history of football.
I mean, if this was a EastEnders script, I don't think they'd write it, because even they'd be like, "It's not realistic." Even for us, this isn't realistic. Nobody's going to believe that this would happen. He has got quite an eclectic staff with him as well. Ben and Carl Robinson, who I don't remember ever being an assistant manager. I only remember him as a manager. And then Robbie Keane, and even Sam's quote about Robbie Keane was how much he loves the club purely because he played there. Robbie Keane played for everyone.
Yeah, he's back at one of his 12 boyhood clubs now.
Yeah.
It's funny having, well, not fun. I mean, it's just the way that Leeds have gone from finishing 9th under Bielsa to, 2 years later they've got Sam Allardyce in charge and they're scraping relegation scrap. Messing my neighbour is a Leeds fan. He was just like, he's just speechless. Doesn't really know what to say about it. And you would think they need one win to secure their safety. And Allardyce is probably seen as the right man to do it. I'd say they just need one win from the last 4, and that will basically see them up. Given,
I don't like to disagree with you on everything you said in the podcast, Ben. They need at least 2.
At least points. I'm saying at least one. At least one. The thing is, though, you got Allardyce back, and his final 4 games in his last management. Last role manager was West Brom, and he lost those final 4 games of the season. So not good omen, and they do have a pretty tough run in. But if they can pick up at least a win in the next 4, they would stand a much better stead, a much better foundation to consolidate their place. It's just he's unfortunate that he has to take on Man City this weekend, and it would be great for the narrative if he were to pick up a result at City.
It's on telly. I'm talking a narrative. The fact he has to play Newcastle and West Ham, 2 clubs he's managed who hated him in those 4 games, is also just beautiful.
It was going to be difficult for him to not play clubs that he's managed. It was going to be really, really hard.
but the two of them plus Everton are the 3 where he really wasn't popular.
One thing I do think Allardyce was doing in his press conference, and he said he honestly said so much. If you haven't watched the whole thing, go back and watch it because it is absolute god. I think he's in some way just trying to. I'm going to say all this stuff and just trying to alleviate the pressure from my team completely and just get people talking about me. I did feel there was an element of that with a lot of the stuff he was saying.
Yeah, I hope that's what he was doing. I don't know because I don't know if you've listened to any of his No Tippy Tappy Football podcast.
I saw a clip,
but I mean I wasn't aware it existed till yesterday, and I've heard quite a lot of it since. There's a lot of nonsense on there. I do slightly fear. I mean, look, Allardyce is apart from Peter. Well, since Peter Reid, he's the best manager Sunderland have had.
Jeez.
If England had a good year in 2016 and Roy Hodgson hadn't left and Allardyce hadn't got that job for 60 whatever days it was, Sunderland would have been in a much healthier position. It was the end of that season was the first time in a long time that it looked like Sunderland were getting things together. And I know there's all kinds of rows between him and the board over transfer budgets and whatever, but the 4 signings he made in the January were all very good. Well, 3 of them were very good. One of them was okay. He knew what he was doing. I'm not one of these sort of Allardyce mockers, but having listened to some of that podcast, having heard that press conference yesterday, I do wonder if he might have lost his grip on modern football. And that would concern me. And obviously, the way things went at West Brom wouldn't inspire you with confidence. On the other hand, they were going down on Javi Gracia. Whatever happened, 3 minutes before half time against Crystal Palace destroyed them. It is something different. It might be enough to shake them up and get them that 5-6 points they probably need.
Leeds may as well have just stuck with Jesse Marsh because they'd backed him and all the players they'd bought were to suit the brand of football that he plays. And now they're just in no man's land. Allardyce might well keep them up, but he's not going to get the job permanently next season. I wouldn't think it's just. I mean, he'll get paid handsomely as well, so he'll be chuffed.
Depending which report you believe, it's either a £3 million or £4 million bonus if they stay up.
It's good work.
And given that theoretically they could lose every game and stay up, that's. I mean, I don't for a second think that will happen, but theoretically it could happen. I mean, that would be a hilarious kind of denouement to his career.
Ben, on Sam Allardyce, I believe you've compiled a quiz for us.
Yeah, so Sam Allardyce doesn't have the best record against Man City. I think they're his second least favourite opponents. He hasn't won a game at Man City since 2006, where his Bolton side won 2-0. What I want to know is, who was the goal scorer that day for Bolton?
This was not
the same player scored 2 goals.
Yep.
I mean, clearly I don't know. I'm just going to have to guess. Is the reason why it's significant?
Do you want the clue? Because that will make it.
I don't want the clue. So there is something in this. There's going to be something in this somewhere, a link to something or someone. So yeah. I mean, for the life of me, haven't got a clue what it is. I'll just guess Kevin Davies, but it's not going to be him.
No, it's not Kevin Davies.
Ricardo Gardner.
Gardner.
Bruno Ngotti.
No.
Ivan Campo.
Kevin Nolan. Kevin Nolan.
It's not no Nolan. And no.
Akocha, Jokev.
No.
Yeah, go on and give us a clue.
He played for both Man City and Bolton.
Oh, it's not an Elka.
It is an Elka.
Ah, very good.
An Elka.
In one. Got it in one.
Yeah, just edit out all the rest of the guesses. Make me look like an absolute genius, please, producer.
What I want to know is, who was the goal scorer that day for Bolton?
Oh, it's not an Elka.
It is an Elka.
Ah, very good.
An Elka. Good quiz question, though. I was expecting, can we name the 9 Premier League clubs that Sam Allardyce has managed? That was what I was expecting.
Oh, let's try that. So Newcastle, Sunderland, West Ham, Everton, Palace, Bolton, Leeds,
West Brom.
West Brom.
and one more Blackburn.
Okay, there we go. Let's have our score predictions for this one then. Manchester City v Leeds. Is anyone going to be brave enough to predict anything but a Manchester City win? Jonathan?
No, 3-0 to City.
3-0 to Man City. Ben?
4-0 Man City.
4-0 Man City. I would go 2-0 to Man City. As I've said, it's all academic anyway. Next, we're going to look at Nottingham Forest against Southampton. Jonathan, 1,000 players through the door for Forest this season. Varying degrees of success. In fairness, they did need to buy a lot because their squad was very small at the start of this season. How many would you quantify as having been a success?
Well, I think you've got to say Gibbs White is. I think you'd probably say Nico Williams. I know he's injured now, but I think given his age, I think he's looked decent. Freuler and Van Lodi, I think have done okay. And beyond that, I don't know. They seem to have a lot of players who sort of played 15 games, and I don't know if that's just they've got so many players to keep rotating. I don't know if it's injuries. I mean, whenever you look at them, they always seem to have a massive injury list. But then I don't know if that's because they've just got a massive squad. So if 10% of your squad is always injured, then their injury list is always going to be bigger than other people's. I mean, I don't know. Something like Emmanuel Dennis, who I thought there was signs at Watford last season. He was a decent player. I know Nigeria quite annoyed that he didn't go to the Cup of Nations. He hasn't really done it. I think Lingard's been a big disappointment again, obviously injury affected. Morgan Gibbs-White, definitely. And then maybe Freuler, Renan Lodi and Nico Williams on the next tier down. And then there may be others who've... I mean, Kiate, I think, is a decent player, but he hasn't really done it, has he?
Cost them last game. Cost them against Brentford with his...
Yeah.
I say the two keepers have been good signings on loan. Henderson was doing quite well until he got injured, and Navas is a great goalkeeper. You could say he made a couple of mistakes in last game. Kasper Schmeichel disagreed on Monday Night Football, but I've watched a fair bit of Forest.
He has kept them
in some games.
Absolutely. He's a loan signing, right? So
yeah, but I'd still say he's been classed as a success. I would say anyway.
Yeah.
They did too much in January. Like that, I did think people into the equation. I didn't think they needed to add John Joe Shelby, for example. Has he really come in and made them any better? Is he any better than what was there? I don't think so. I think that was a bit panic stations, and then that's caused Cooper to have to try and bring a team together when it felt like he just kind of found his team. He's then thrown a million more players back into the equation. I think Cooper's done a brilliant job under the circumstances. Ben, what do you think?
Completely agree. They were doing fine until that January window. They even muddled through January pretty well, but since that closed, they've only won two league games. As you said, they're overcomplicating it by adding all these extra players in, which they really didn't need to do when they were doing not great. But as you said, Cooper had got a cohesive unit together, which seemed relatively impossible given they brought in 75 new players in the summer anyway, and then to add more on top of that in January really saw them struggle in the final months of the season. It's not a surprise when you've got this nice balance, this nice harmony in the squad, and to throw these new faces in has really disrupted things for them.
Danilo looks a decent player as well from what I've seen of him. I've watched a couple of games recently and Danilo's look lively in the midfield. So I think long term he'll be a good player and he's not going to be someone that they're going to lose money on. I think he looks like he's a talent. But Jonathan, I guess if you'd offered Forest the position they're in now at the start of the season, still having a chance of staying up with 4 games left, they'd have taken this position. And this home game now, it's must win. They've got to beat Southampton, but they'd have probably taken where they are now, I would say.
Probably. I mean, certainly, so 6 weeks into the season after that rotten start. I guess the problem is you look at where they were when the World Cup starts, and they'd improved quite a lot by then. They looked like they might be comfortable mid-table. But yeah, I think if you'd said, what are they on, 30 points?
Yeah.
If you'd said to them, you need 6 points from the last 4 games of the season, which will be bottom of the table, Southampton at home, Chelsea away. Okay, Arsenal at home will be difficult. Crystal Palace away when Palace may have nothing. Well, we'll have nothing left to play for. It's not a bad position to be in at all. And I think the crucial thing for them was beating Brighton at home. The last home game that they'd been on that terrible run. You did think that they just sort of going to keep going. But Brighton, and we know how good Brighton have been this season, to beat them is a big result. It's probably not a game they really expected a lot out of. And what it means is it's just sort of changed the mood ahead of this game, which is one they absolutely would expect or feel they need to get a win from.
There were some heartbreaking results, Rhys. In that Brentford game last week, they were in control, 10 minutes left, winning 1-0, and they've somehow come away from that with absolutely nothing. But this game is huge on Monday night against Southampton. Then you've got a stat here. I've got no idea what it means.
The 14 youngest starting 11s in the Premier League this season, in terms of average age, have been 11 of those have been by Southampton. Two of them by Arsenal, one by Leeds. But you see that inexperience has probably cost Southampton because they've got some really talented young players in there. Lavia, Alcaraz, Bella Kotchap are all really good players. It's just they lack that, those experienced heads to have helped to keep them afloat. I know they've got Ward-Prowse, who will probably leave this summer now. But it's the inexperience that has ultimately cost them. If they bought in a bit better in January, added a couple of Premier League stalwarts, not stalwarts per se, but Premier League experienced players, they might have been in a stronger position now. As it is, they look as pretty much down. If they lose to Forest, that's basically it for them. It's just that inexperience has really cost them.
Southampton have done what Villa did in 2015-16, where they've signed a load of young, hot prospects. They'll go down, but I guarantee 3 or 4 of those players will go on and have excellent careers. That's Villa side that went down. Jordan Veretout was in the France squad at the World Cup. He's played for Roma, played for Marseille. Idrissa Gana Gueye played for PSG for a long time. Jordan Ayew's been in the Premier League ever since he left Villa. Darman Traore has had a decent career. There was players there in that Villa side that went down on 17 points that went on and was successes elsewhere, but trying to get all that together in the Premier League is really, really difficult. Hindsight's a great thing in football, Jonathan. They shouldn't have got rid of Hasenhüttl, really, should they? Because he was proven at keeping them up. And yes, Nathan Jones was great for us. Really, really entertaining period in Premier League history that will go down in folklore. But from the looks of it, the 2 managers that have come in since Hasenhüttl, between them, they've pulled up the same amount of points that Ralph managed. So they should have just stuck with him because he kept them up for seasons before.
Yeah, I mean, Hasenhüttl is there was always an inconsistency there. They were capable of pretty much beating anybody sort of 3-0, but also capable of losing games 9-0. And I guess that just wore down at people. But I feel sort of, I'm obviously one of those teams that as a journalist, you don't see as much as you would see of an Arsenal or a City or United. And I never knew I was going to get when I watched them. You sort of felt talking to fans that they couldn't really work out if they're any good or not. But in a sense, that inconsistency is in Hasenhüttl's favour because it means that however bad things are, there's a chance of bouncing back. So I think was getting rid of Hasenhüttl when they got rid of him wrong? Possibly not. But there's no doubt that things have got worse since. That the succession plan after him was not good. So I think you see clubs do this quite a lot. That they sort of think, right, we've got to do something. We'll sack the manager because that is something. It's a sign that we're listening to fans. We're reacting to results, to form. But if you don't have a plan for what comes next, what's the point? You end up just sort of all the problems are already there just get worse because the person who's in charge doesn't know where he's trying to get to. And Hasenhüttl, I think, certainly with that respect, you'd say had enough in the bank that he probably deserved a bit longer to try and put things right. I know there've been all the problems with the change of backroom staff in this last summer, which suggested they'd sort of come to doubt him. But there's no question that things have got worse since he went.
He also worked with him all summer, though. He would have been involved in the process of bringing the players in that they brought in to then get rid of him and bring in Nathan Jones, who just doesn't suit. I'm not sure if he suits the Premier League. He didn't suit that club. It was just a nonsense appointment, and that period has cost them. Really, that'll be one of the reasons they go down.
Well, the thing about that period was they played a lot of the. I mean, it's not totally dissimilar to the Vieira Hodgson situation at Palace, where Hasenhüttl had a lot of difficult games just before he went, and there's an easy fixture list coming up. But whereas Hodgson has capitalised on an easier fixture list to take, 13 points from 6 games, Nathan Jones just had a disaster. And they wasted those winnable games. And that really is what's cost them, rather than what's happened since, I think.
This season has just been wild. We've had fittest man on the planet, Nathan Jones, the best manager on the planet, Sam Allardyce. This season has just been absolutely wild. Let's get some predictions then. Nottingham Forest v Southampton. Ben?
I think Forest will win this one 3-1.
3-1 to Forest. I really want Forest to stay up. Great club, Forest. I've got a bad feeling for them in this game. I think something silly's going to happen. I'm going to go 1-1. Jonathan?
I'm going to go 1-0 to Forest.
1-0 to Forest. Let's move on to the Just a Minute section then. And Jonathan has the honour of starting us off this week with the Midlands derby, West Midlands derby. It's Wolves v Villa.
Wolves now 7 points clear of the relegation zone. They may already have enough points. We were saying before that 35, 36 is probably enough. They've got 37. And another win, I'm sure they'll be absolutely safe. Hammered at Brighton 6-0 last week, which maybe is an indication that Brighton are really good and had some goals in the bank, given how they seem to have wasted chances against United and Chelsea particularly. Maybe it's a sign that Wolves have slightly lost focus. They had won 3 of the 4 games before that Brighton game, though, Wolves. All of those 3 at home, and 26 of the 37 points have come at home. So, like Forest, a much better team at home than away. Villa are now 9 points off 4th. So really it's all about securing Europa League football. Champions League looks out of range. That defeat to Manchester United last week ended a run of 10 unbeaten, which took 26 points. And it's the first time we felt a score in 22. Doubts over Cash, Kamara, Bailey and Coutinho for Villa. There's 1-1 at Villa Park, but I think they'll have enough and win this 1-0.
Go on, Jonathan. I want to go 2-1 to Villa. Ben?
Big 1-1.
Don't like that. Not happy with
Sorry.
that, Ben. It's okay. Ben, you've got Bournemouth v Chelsea. Good luck even talking about Chelsea in a minute.
Bournemouth have all but secured their Premier League status following 4 win over relegation rivals Leeds last weekend to open up a 9-point gap between themselves and the bottom 3 with 4 games to play. The Cherries have now won 4 of their last 5 as they end the season strongly. Gary Neal has a few injury doubts for the welcome with Chelsea, with Hamid Traore, Kiefer Moore and Chris Mepham all need to be assessed. However, Marcus Tavernier, Brian Frederickson Jr. Stanislas all absent. Chelsea's miserable run of form continued midweek as they lost 3-1 at Arsenal. Blues are ending the season poorly, and there are concerns that a 6-game losing run will continue on the South Coast this weekend. Reece James isn't out for the rest of the season, while Mason Mount and Kalidou Koulibaly have a slim chance of playing again before the campaign draws still close. However, Mark Cucurella is also absent for Frank Lampard's side that would unlikely have started with Ben Chilwell first choice left back. I think that Bournemouth will win 2-1.
I think Bournemouth will win 3-0. They're pretty much safe, Bournemouth now. I just think they'll be able to play with some freedom. And Chelsea, Lampard can't even pick a team.
I think this is the start of a Lampard comeback. I think they'll get a point, 1-1.
Right then, the Wayne Routledge derby for you, Jonathan, or the Chris Armstrong derby, Tottenham v Palace.
Spurs on a run of 1 win from the last 7 games, and that has left them now 9 points off the Champions League. It's all about now the battle for Europa League football. Level with Villa, 2 points above Brighton, but Brighton have 3 games in hand, including tonight's game against Manchester United. They're also a lot better at home than they are away. They've taken 34 or 50 points at home, which perhaps isn't that starting statistic, but they haven't won away from home since the Fulham game in January, so they'll be glad to get back to the Tottenham Stadium. They have scored in the last 8 games, so goals aren't a problem for them, but they have conceded 15 in their last 4. Palace have won 4, drawn 1, lost 1 in 6 games under Roy Hodgson. They're now 11th and surely safe. Emerson Royale, Basuma, Bentancur and Sessegnon are out. And there's doubts over Lloris and Skip for Tottenham. Zaha a doubt for Palace. It was 4-0 to Tottenham at Selhurst Park this season. And I think they'll win again, but only by 2-1.
2-2.
I'm just going to predict what I want to happen because I think that Villa and Spurs are in a shootout for Europe. So I'm going to go 3-1 to Crystal Palace. Different predictions for different needs. Ben, Liverpool v Brentford.
Liverpool made it 5 wins on the spin in midweek as the first half Mohamed Salah penalty proved the difference against Fulham on Wednesday night. Reds are making a late push for a top 4 finish, though have played more games than Newcastle, Manchester United above them in the table. Naby Keita is the only player with a chance of returning for Liverpool this weekend, but Thiago, Calvin Ramsey, Stefan Bajcetic and Roberto Firmino are all absent. Luis Diaz started for the second game running against Fulham, but Jurgen Klopp has plenty of options in attack to rotate, with Diogo Jota and Cody Gakpo both featuring from the bench. After a 6-game winless run, Brentford have earned back-to-back league wins, having gotten the better of Chelsea and Nottingham Forest in recent weeks. The Bees are now just 4 points outside the top 6 with 4 games to play. Thomas Frank is without trio Pontus Janssen, Keane Lewis, Potter and Christian Norgard, while Thomas Strakosha and Christopher Adjur will be assessed. Liverpool have the third best home record in the Premier League this season, and one would expect that record to continue this weekend. I think Liverpool will win this one 3-1.
I will go 2-1 to Liverpool. Jonathan?
2-0 to Liverpool.
2-0 to Liverpool. Right, it's the Paul Ince derby for you, Jonathan. West Ham against Manchester United.
West Ham, 4 points clear the relegation zone. So probably 2 points, 3 points will be enough to see them safe. But they have lost their last 3. Having said that, 2 of those were by a single goal, and the other one was the game against City last night, when actually, given who they had out, they played all right. 3-0 felt sort of the maximum that City deserved in that game, albeit they did the bar twice. But I think there was enough in that performance. West Ham shouldn't be too worried by that. United's win against Villa last week was their first in 4, but they're now 4 points clear in 4th with 2 games in hand, and the 2 points behind Newcastle with a game in hand, but playing Brighton tonight. A load of injuries to both sides. Lisandro Martinez, McTominay and Varane, the big absentees for United. Skamaka, Zuma, Souček are all out for West Ham. Actually, Souček might be a doubt. And then Agurd, Kufal and Declan Rice, doubts. It's 1-0 at Old Trafford, and I think United will win again 2-1.
0-2 for me. Ben?
2-1 United as well.
Okay. Ben, Brighton against Everton.
Yeah, at the time of writing, Brighton have 3 games in hand on those around the table ahead of tonight to welcome Manchester United. The Seagulls are unbeaten 4 at home ahead of Thursday's game, and they'll be confident denting Everton's quest to beat the drop, though they have failed to win their last 2 at home against the Toffees. Roberto De Zerbi remains without Jakob Murder, Adam Lallana, Joel Veltman and Tariq Lamptey, while there is a chance Evan Ferguson could return to the starting fold if he doesn't make the squad to face Manchester United on Thursday night. Seamus Coleman was stretched off in the 2-2 draw with Leicester on Monday night, and it's safe to assume his season is over, with Nathan Patterson expected to debutise at right back. Ben Godfrey, Dele Alli, Ruben Vinagre and Andros Townsend are also absent for Monday's trip to South Coast. Toffees are winners in 13 on their travels. Their Monday's 2-2 draw at the King Power made 4 draws from the last 5 on the road as they seek to put crucial points on the board at this stage of the season. That said, the Toffees have the 3rd worst away record in the division, a record that they're unlikely to improve upon against Brighton, and I think Brighton will win this one 3-1.
2-1 Brighton. Jonathan?
2-0 Brighton.
Jonathan, the last one for you is Fulham v Leicester, the Anthony Knockaert derby, the big one.
Well, it is a big game for Leicester. They're level on points with Leeds and Forest. You're sort of skirting around the relegation zone. You'd probably say they need 2 wins from the final 4 games to be safe. Given they've got Liverpool and Newcastle up next before what could be an absolutely vital game on the final day against West Ham, they probably do need to win this one. They have improved under Dean Smith. Played City first up. You can't read too much of that, but showed enough in the second half to suggest things were not as dire as it perhaps had appeared before. Then they've taken 5 points from the 3 games since, albeit possibly slightly fortunate to get the point against Everton in midweek. Fulham seem to have switched off. Then they're missing the suspended Mitrovic, definitely. They've lost 8 of the last 10. But having said that record probably isn't quite as bad as it seems. After beating Everton and Leeds, they've played Villa, City and Liverpool, 3 teams in form. Pereira, Ream, Kazawa, all out for them, as well as Mitrovic. Justin Iheanacho, Vestergaard out, and Pereira, Evans and Bertrand are doubts for Leicester. It was 1-0 to Fulham at the King Power. I'm going to go 1-1.
I'm going to go for 2-1 to Leicester. Ben?
Big 1-1 as well.
I nearly called you Dean then, because I was thinking about Dean Smith. Right, that does us for this week's podcast. Thanks ever so much for joining us. Hopefully you've enjoyed us previewing this weekend's Premier League action. Please subscribe to the channel with your post notifications on. Give the video a like if you've enjoyed it, and comment as well with your thoughts ahead of the weekend. We'll be back next week to do it all again, but obviously for different games. As ever, enjoy the football at the weekend and please stay safe.